But in doing that, there are some byproducts, some side effects, if you will. And those are some of the things that I was fascinated by. Now, in the medical field, when we look at the term, for instance, the term healing, that was something that I actually learned the definition of during my second year of medical school, where healing was defined as the transcendence of suffering. And this is a definition that was created by researchers at the University of Washington, where they went beyond the physical landscape. So it's not just physically curing illnesses. Healing goes beyond that. It's a transcendence of suffering. It involves things such as wholeness and spirituality. So what they mean by wholeness is a sense of looking at yourself and your well-being separate from your physical being. So, for example, if you have patients who have a spinal cord injury and they're paralyzed from the neck down, well, physically they've lost about 90% of the functions that they're capable of. But we believe that those people can still heal from that injury. Physically, they'll never be the same, but they can spiritually and mentally, they can regain a sense of wholeness, a sense of looking at their self-worth beyond just their physical limitations. Spirituality, in the medical definition, is defined as looking at the context and contextualizing various illnesses. For example, again, if a patient gets into a car accident, they can come into the emergency room, we can fix their wounds, we can give them blood, and physically repair them. But afterwards, they can suffer for years. They may never want to get into another car again. They may suffer from PTSD and have nightmares for the rest of their lives. So they're not fully healed from that process. And so this is something that, again, the medical field has looked at and said that human beings are more complex than just their individual parts. We can't just look at them and say, well, I'm going to stitch this up and stitch that up and now you're good. There's more to it than that. And so having said that, what I want to do for the rest of my talk tonight is take a look at two sort of high-yield topics. And again, these are kind of byproducts of our spiritual journey. We're going towards that love of Allah, really immersing ourselves in that love of Allah. What are some byproducts of that? And I'm going to support that, some of my points with some medical literature and citing a couple of works. So two topics I'm going to touch on, pretty high yield. They are decreasing stress and maximizing happiness. And believe it or not, these are things that are really, really driving the medical field crazy, because I'll talk a little bit about how each is very, very important for, again, your entire well-being. So with that being said, the first one, stress. So stress is known in the medical field as kind of the silent killer. There's a lot of things, when people say, oh, you're stressed out, they think it's all about just mental health. But there's a lot of, physically, a lot of things that are happening to you. For example, the main hormone that's released when you are stressed is called cortisol. And cortisol is known as the flight or flight hormone. So this is the hormone that when you're in the jungle and there's a tiger in front of you, then this hormone kicks up. And so you have to be ready. It kind of gets your responses up to be ready to either fight or get flight. But the problem is that nowadays, this cortisol is being released at a really, really high level during unnecessary times. Your flight or fight response should not be activated when you're sitting in the middle of traffic. It shouldn't be activated when you're writing a paper for class and it's the night before. But this is a constant thing. Within our lives right now, there's a lot of reasons for this to go really, really high in our bodies. And so what exactly happens physiologically to you when you get stressed and you release this hormone? First of all, your blood sugar increases, your blood pressure increases, and the amount of your muscle breakdown occurs, and then fat buildup as well. So as you can imagine, too much of it is going to lead to really bad circumstances, years down the line. At the same time, you get a decrease in your immune system and your ability to fight illnesses. So you get anything from like the common cold to the flu, you'll get it more often. And then it also decreases bone formation. So there's a lot of reasons why cortisol can, and that really heightened stress response can lead to a lot of complications down the line. What I want to do next is inspired by something I learned during school, which is the average attention span of the adult is about 10 minutes. So one of the things they actually encourage us to do is to constantly change the sort of environment of learning. So I don't want to just sit up here and talk to you guys. I kind of wanted to make this more participatory. So I wanted to do a reflective exercise, and that is inspired by Imam Sadiq ibn Salam, who said that a moment's reflection is worth more than a year of worship. So I want to do a couple of reflective exercises to kind of get our juices pumping here, and then get you all involved in this as well. We have a couple of handouts that we're going to hand out, along with some pens in case anyone didn't bring any pens. And my assistants here will help me hand those out. And so let's do a loud salawat Muhammad. All right, so I'm pretty sure everyone has a sheet. So what I want you guys to do is, it's a two-sided piece of paper. Let's turn to the part that says worldly stressors and then talk about the other side. So what I'd like you guys to do is take just like a minute or two, and we just talked about stress and how big of a deal it is to your well-being. Let's just write down a couple of stressors, and like worldly stressors. So, what's going to happen to you in the afterlife is not really a worldly stressor. So let's keep it to anything that stresses you out right now materially. And by the way, I'm not collecting this or anything, so feel free. This is for you, so your own reflections. let's recite a loud salawat, please. I hope that was enough time for everyone. So now, some of you may have written about finances, some of you may have written about getting into a particular university or college, getting a job, buying a home. Whatever it may be, the point of this exercise was to write down your worldly stressors and to have it divided from taqwa. And the reason is that everything that you have on the left side of your paper, every type of worldly stressor, those are things that Allah will provide you. And this is known in Islam is the concept of rizq and sustenance. And that Allah has made us a promise that if we commit to that right side of the paper, the taqwa, and we wake up every day committed to that He'll take care of what's on the left side. And so there's an easing of the burden that's upon us. So when we have a commitment to this, it creates a decrease in the amount of stress that we have, and it decreases the amount of, again, just the physical well-being, the detriments to it that we face. Now, with that being said, it's easy to kind of just, I'm hoping that the visualization of it and the vision of it will help you all. But another way to deal with the burdens that are upon you, the worldly kind of stressors, there's advice from Imam Sallallahu as to how to deal with it, the approach to take. There are, particularly for families, there are two different ways that are typically used. And one is, and they're both pretty unhealthy, so we'll use two extremes. One is to kind of take worldly stressors and the things that really bother us and kind of suppress them and keep them to ourselves. And keep those burdens very, very, very deep. Now this is a really poor coping mechanism. And in the field of mental health, a lot of, unfortunately, addictions start with this. You have stressors and you don't know what to do with it, so you bury it, and what do? You mask it over with something else. And so this is really detrimental to your mental health. On the flip side of it, there's other people who have burdens and who have stress, and they just try to just share it with everyone, and just this outpouring of grief and despair. And in those moments of despair, you just talk about every type of burden that is occupying your mind at that time. Now, this also can lead to a decrease in the barriers and the communication that you're supposed to have as socially with others. So what does Imam Sallallahu say? That when you have burdens, it's okay to share them. But you gather together as a family, with your spouse, with your children, with your parents, and you share your burdens in the form of dua. When you're turning towards Allah, so not in the moment of despair, but in a moment of hope. You turn towards Allah and ask Him, and again, just reminding yourself that Allah has promised that these things will be taken care of as long as you hold your side of the bargain. And so that teaches, particularly for the youth, it teaches them really positive coping mechanisms. That when you are stressed, and it will happen, when you have insurmountable burdens in this world, that the answer is not to suppress, the answer is not to overly share with everyone, the answer is not to resort to negative coping mechanisms. The answer is to turn towards Allah. So that is a prescription that Imam Sallallahu prescribes. And the next one, I'm sorry I'm making you guys do a lot of writing, this is the last one. It's just another reflective exercise. On the back sheet of your papers, there's a very simple question. And this is inspired by research that was done at UC Berkeley that I'll get to in a second. But the question is very simple, that if I just gave you right now $1,000, and I told you, the only thing I want you to do with that money is make yourself happy. So go out and just do whatever you want to make yourself happy. But you need to come back to me, and I need you to be happy, okay? So what would you all do? And you can take a moment to write this down. Just anything you would do with that. I'll give you guys a minute or two for that too. Let's recite another loud salawat, please. So, regardless of what you all heard in your papers, this question was inspired by research done at UC Berkeley, where they essentially took college students, about 200 from California, 200 from Russia, and 200 from Taiwan, and they did the same prompt that I just gave you all. So basically, just they're trying to connect intent of happiness with well-being. And so what they found, and I know that sounds like an overly simple sort of research to do, like, hey, make yourself happy, and I predict that you will probably be happy. So the success rate is probably predictably going to be high, but what they found was really interesting. So in Russia and in Taiwan, they were able to actually accomplish the task. But the college students from California actually ended up becoming less happy. They reported more signs of depression, more signs of feeling less happy than they were before. So then it was puzzling. They had one job, they couldn't do it. So they asked, they started looking at what were the different activities that these different college students did. So the kids in Russia and Taiwan, because the societies and the communities there are so communal, they perform things like community service. They perform things like volunteering for charity. They did things with their families. Whereas the kids in California were doing things like buying themselves shoes, buying themselves video games, or buying themselves things that benefited themselves in the material sense. And so what they found, and this is something that's been proven over and over in various forms of research, is that happiness comes from a sense of community, and in having those communal bonds with others. And in sharing those, there's a sense of elation that's measured in different parts of the brain. For example, there was another research where they looked at MRI scans of the brain of different participants of a research study. And this was done, I believe, at the University of Washington as well. And what they were looking for was the reward center of the brain being highlighted or being activated. So they did two things. They took about 100 people, and for half of them, they said, thank you for participating in our study. Here's a $100 gift card. And then they did an MRI, and lo and behold, the reward center gets activated. Well, the other half, what they did was, thank you so much for participating in our study. We're going to take $100 and donate it to X charity. And the same exact reward center was activated. And so this is just one example, but it's been proven over and over again that the human body, literally, it responds to a sense of communal sharing, a communal bond with others, communal joy with others. So what does that mean Islamically? When we pray for Imam Mahdi's reappearance, for example, every time we pray Dua Faraj, or every time we gather together for Dua Mutbah, we have to remember that the prayer for Imam Mahdi's reappearance is a prayer that is the deliverance of every single prayer for anyone who's been oppressed, anyone who has faced injustice, and anyone who has been under the rule of a tyrant. So it is a prayer that we perform not only for ourselves, for our benefit, to be able to see our Imam once again, but the benefit of every single suffering person throughout the world. And it's also the benefit of the Imam of our time, who is also yearning to see us and yearning to be back with his followers. So with these short examples, I just wanted to highlight that there's, again, a lot of different, and I could go into different pieces of medical literature if it went for the time, but there's a lot of research being done to look at spiritually what are different practices that are affecting our well-being. And I believe that these two things, the risk that we have, the sustenance and relying on Allah for different worldly burdens, as well as the prayer, just a simple prayer for the Imam of our time, can be very high-yield methods of ensuring not only our spiritual health, but also our mental and physical health. And I want to end by just giving you all just a short Buddhist parable that I read that I thought was pretty powerful. So there's a beggar that is sitting on the street, and he's reaching his hand out and just asking for change. And a stranger walks by and says, can I help you? And he says, well, I'm asking for money. Do you have any change? And the stranger says, no, I don't have anything to give you, but you're sitting on a box. Have you ever looked what's inside that box? And the beggar says, no, this box is empty. I've been sitting on it for years. I said, yeah, but have you ever looked inside? And, no, I haven't looked inside, but I know it's empty. Well, just stand up, just look inside for a moment. And he stands up and he opens the box, and he finds that it's filled with gold. And so the stranger said, he's been sitting on this box this entire time. All you have to do is stand up and just open it. And so when we're committing ourselves to attending such events and committing ourselves to an Islamic lifestyle, we have to remember that Allah is the one who not only created our spirits, but also created our physical well-being. And that if we look to Him and look to the Ahlul Bayt and their teachings, there's a world of rewards that awaits us in the afterlife, but I genuinely believe that there's also physical rewards that we can reap in this world as well. And so with that said, let's recite another lot salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. I'm going to prepare the next talk for you all. Thank you all so much for listening, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Brother Mateen, for that beautiful speech. I always personally love when we're able to merge medicine and Islam. A lot of folks think that they're two separate entities, but there's always a way of connecting the two. And I think the best way is to connect the two. And it was a very beautiful video as well regarding our dear Imam. So our eighth Imam Rida or Reza, whom I am named after, peace be upon him, has a famous hadith in which he elaborates on the characteristics of and the role of the Imams. In his hadith, he speaks in the singular, referring to the Imam, meaning that all the Imams embodied these traits during their time. And of course, our own Imam Mahdi, peace be upon him, now embodies them in our time. Which kind of gives me a sense that there should be another theme in the future for one of our programs regarding this. Spoiler alert. So there's a very dense and meaningful hadith that sheds so much light on both who the Imams are and why Allah has sent them down upon this earth to guide us. This leads us perfectly into the next segment of our celebration. Our next presenter will be one of our youngest presenters to grace the stage. Our dear sister Bushra Noruzi is a 7th grader, and she is an active member of our local and school communities. She's serving in the student government, participating in Odyssey of the Mind, and she's a member of Advancement via Individual Determination, or AVID. Hailing from a family of Islamic scholars, she's also a rising leader in her own right. She is not only a student of Islamic studies, but also a teacher, having held classes for younger kids. And she even has her own YouTube channel, where she introduces children to Islamic figures and concepts. Shout out for her YouTube channel if you'd like to look it up. It's Bushra Noruzi, Bushra space Norozi. So look up her YouTube channel, it's very nice. And the poem that she'll be reciting for us tonight is inspired by this particular hadith of Imam Rizal. And so please help us in welcoming her to the stage to present To the Kind Father with a loud salawat. Allahumma
Assalamu alaikum. As you guys know, I'm Bushra and I'm going to be reading a poem that was inspired by Imam Riza's hadith about the characteristics of the Imams. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. To the Kind Father. Mahdi Ajalallahu Ta'ala Faraja. May God hasten his reappearance. The Imam, the genuine friend, the kind father, the faithful brother, the loving mother to the small child. Mahdi Ajalallahu Ta'ala Faraja. The Imam, the brilliant sun rising to the world way out in the horizon, way out of the reach of hands and eyes. Mahdi Ajalallahu Ta'ala Faraja. The Imam, the luminous full moon shining like a dazzling light, pleasing like a radiant bloom, the guiding star in the dark gloom, the arid desert and the crashing seas. Mahdi Ajalallahu Ta'ala Faraja. The Imam, the replenishing rain, the gushing spring, the quenching water for the thirsty, the guide to the path, and the savior from destruction. Mahdi Ajalallahu Ta'ala Faraja. The Imam, the guiding fire on the desert islands, the bright fire, emanating heat and light for its desperate seekers on a cold, dark night. Mahdi Ajalallahu Ta'ala Faraja. The Imam, the protective shelter in the time of calamity, the safeguard against convenient traps, the lone solace in times of catastrophe. Mahdi Ajalallahu Ta'ala Faraja. The Imam, giants are small, philosophers are confused, thinkers unacquainted, poets are exhausted, writers are speechless, and speakers are tongue-tied, for none can properly convey the full truth of Imam Mahdi, the importance of Imam Mahdi, nor the value of Imam Mahdi. Mahdi Ajalallahu Ta'ala Faraja. May God hasten his reappearance. So.
It's okay to clap as well. beautiful, very beautiful. And like I mentioned, so there's that hadith, and our dear sister brought up all those traits that are mentioned in this hadith. So keep that in mind, that our imam is a very, very beautiful and good imam that we can all connect with. It's very kind. And keep that in mind every time you want to remember him. So this leads to our next portion. We can skip this too, right, Mahdi? Our next speaker is named after the Sahib of this majlis, Mahdi Gharabi. Mahdi is an educator and writer here in the DC metro area. He's one of the founding members of Oasis and serves as one of its Islamic studies educators. Before we welcome to the stage, we will be watching a short video clip regarding the ziyarat of Imam Mahdi, which his lecture is going to be about. So please join me in both welcoming Mahdi to the stage and while he presents to us the Friday conversation, and watching an excerpt of the ziyarat with a loud salawat.
السلام عليك يا حجة الله في أرض السلام عليك يا حجة الله في أرض السلام عليك يا عين الله في خلقه السلام عليك يا نور الله الذي يهتدي به المهتدون ويفرج به عن المؤمنين السلام عليك أيها المهذب الخالق السلام عليك أيها الولي المحسن السلام عليك أيها المهذب السلام عليك أيها الولي المحسن السلام عليك يا سفينة النجاة السلام عليك يا أين الحياة يا أين
صلى على محمد وعلى محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
We forgot to mention that the added theme of today is difficulties. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. I have to begin by apologizing for those, especially those who came early today. We had some glitches that precluded us from joining on time. Our dear brothers and sisters who are joining us online, that had its own several glitches, so I sincerely apologize to everybody for that. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa bihi nasta'in, innahu khayrun nasiran wa mu'in.
Those of you who are here in person, you guys find it okay? Yeah. So some of you, this might be your third, fourth, fifth time coming here for these programs. Maybe you went to GW, so you know how to get there. Anyone first time? Any first timers here? Wonderful. You guys found it okay? Now what do you do when you want to go somewhere? When you want to go somewhere you've never been to before? I have the address, right? You ask a friend maybe. At least if you're my age or older, you're used to asking a friend, hey, I need directions, how do I get there? See, before the time of GPS, it was always, hey, how do I get there? And very often your friend would say, oh, all you have to do is just go on this street, then turn here, then turn here, then turn there, and you realize, oh, this was my backyard the whole time. My friend told me all around this. He didn't know exactly how to get me there. Now, if I told you, yeah, that program for the 15th of Shaban, it's in the DMV area. It's in the DMV area. Is it DC? Is it Maryland? Is it Virginia? Oh, I'm sorry. It's in Washington, D.C. You are no help. You walk over to someone else and they tell you, yes, it's on G Street, 2201. What you have to do is you have to go turn onto Virginia Avenue. Once you hit D.C., turn onto Virginia Avenue, then onto 22nd, you'll hit G and it's right there. If you hit the fire station, you've gone too far. I guess that's okay. I guess. I don't know where the fire station is. How do I get to Virginia Avenue? Forget it. I heard you say it. 2201 G Street, hop into your GPS, you've mounted on your car, maybe your car has a navigation system, then you don't have to think about it anymore. You can enjoy the scenery while you're driving. It's DC, it's downtown DC, it's gorgeous. But you know you're going to get there. And if you're going the wrong way, your GPS is going to say, no, hold on, turn around, rerouting. It's going to tell you how much time it's going to take you to get there, and it's going to recalculate and calculate until, boom, you're there. I'm going to switch gears for a moment, please. We're talking about ziyarah. Particularly the Friday ziyarah. But before we get there, what does ziyarah mean? That's not a rhetorical question. Anyone know what ziyarah means? To visit someone. Perfect. Salawat for her, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wajjal farajahum. Shameless personal plug. I got a chance to visit the holy shrines of the Imams in Haram. In Najaf and Karbala, not only did I get to visit the Imams in Karbala, I got to see a descendant of the Imams in Karbala. I got to see Sayyid Mahdi while I was there. It was wonderful. That trip is called the Ziyarah trip. When you go to Hajj, usually we don't just go to Mecca. No, Medina's right there. I can't not visit the Prophet. God's greatest of all his creations. I'm going to go visit the Prophet. That ziyarah is part and parcel with it. Is that it? Is that all it means? What else does ziyarah mean? Anyone? Say that again? Oh, like to visit their grave. Yeah. So, thank you. So, to visit, in fact, is used in a general term. I visit a friend of mine, that's ziyarah, but I also visit their graves. Like that trip we take to Medina, that trip we take to Najaf, that trip we take to Karbala. Anything else?
Show respect.
Show respect. How? That's absolutely right. So salawat for them both, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. There's a particular respect that we pay. When you want to pay respects to an elder, to a family member, to a friend, what do? You visit them. What's it? Part and parcel of that visit. That visit is a greeting. That visit, the time you spend with them, is a long, extended greeting. To stand here from far away and to say salams upon the Ahlul Bayt, that's also referred to as ziyarah. Now, any form of greeting, any form of saying salam alaikum to someone is a ziyarah. But the ziyarah of the Ahlul Bayt is a very particular thing. Why? Why is the ziyarah of the Ahlul Bayt so important? As the Quran says, O you who believe. Believe. It just called us to O you who believe. The Quran says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Oh, you who believe? Believe! We already do. No. Watch. You who come to believe in Allah. More. Take a further step. Aminu, believe. Okay, what comes next? And find a means to get to Allah. Find a way to get to Allah, a path to get to Allah. Now, that path is the Quran telling us, if you want to get to Allah, the author of the Quran, Allah Himself is telling us, if you want to get to me, I have placed the Prophet. I placed his daughter, her husband, and their progeny, their descendants, the Imams. If you want to get to me, connect with these people here. We need that connection. Because while I have that direct connection to Allah, this very same Allah who is closer to me than my jugular vein, Allah says, no, there's more to it. Connect with these people. It's a source of pride for us to say, I am the follower of Ali. Why? Because the follower of Ali, peace be upon him, is the follower of the Prophet. Because the follower of Ali is someone who gets closer to Allah because of, and by virtue of, his connection, her connection to Imam Ali. Case in point, we have a hadith that says Prophet Noah, peace be upon him, on the day of judgment, will get questioned. Noah, for all of those years you preached my teachings, for all of those years you preached my oneness, why did you curse your people? And Prophet Noah, the Prophet of Allah, needs help. He needs assistance. He looks around, who can I get that will be a means between me and Allah? Who can I get to vouch for me? Who can I get who can tell me that I did something for them? Therefore, oh Allah, for my sake, take a break on Noah. Take it easy on Noah. In fact, on Sundays, when we say Ziyarat of Imam Ali, we say Salam alaikum to Imam Ali and to your two neighbors, Adam and Noah. Because Prophet Adam on one side, Prophet Noah on the other, Imam Ali is buried next to them. The grave of Imam Ali, peace be upon him, was even originally dug by Prophet Noah. When Prophet Noah, Allah taught him the story of the Ahlul Bayt, he said, when I get to this Ali, when I hear this Ali, I'm drawn to him, O Lord. Can I do something in service to him? Can I do something for this Ali because I feel this connection to him? I feel a bond to this Ali. Allah gives him permission. Dig this grave. And he does. And he says, oh Allah, can I be buried next to him? Can I dig my own burial plot next to him? And Allah grants him permission. And Imam Ali writes in his will to Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, you take the back of the pulpit because Jibreel will take the front. And as he guides you, you walk to wherever he goes. And when you see the front of my coffin, when you see the front of my coffin lowered to the ground, that's where you shall dig up. And Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein dig up and realize there's already an opening, there's already a cavity, there's already a place for this grave. There's already a place for this coffin. They placed Imam Ali there, right next to Prophet Noah, right next to Prophet Adam. So Prophet Noah, Ya Ali, in the previous world, I dug that burial plot for you. Ya Ali, come to my aid. Elsewhere on the Day of Judgment, Imam Ali hears the words of Prophet Noah, hears the voice of Prophet Noah, and he turns to his brother, Abbas, Abul Fadl Abbas. He says, to his son, Abbas. He says, not to his son Hassan, peace be upon him, not to his son Imam Hussein, peace be upon him, but to his son Hazrat Abbas. And he says, Abbas, go see what Noah wants. You are my representative, and whatever he asks for you to do, do. Tell him I vouch for him. Tell Allah that Ali ibn Abi Talib vouches for Prophet Noah, and ask for Prophet Noah's forgiveness on my behalf. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the Day of Judgment, the hadith continues, elsewhere on the Day of Judgment, a Shia, a follower of Imam Ali, realizes, oh my God, I did so much in my life, so much good, but I did so much bad, and the two are almost equivalent. No, the bad is outweighing the good. Oh Allah, don't put me in the hellfire forever. My people, my community, the Shias rally around them. Those of them who have more to offer, more blessings to offer. Here, I'll give some of my blessings. Please, Allah, accept some of my blessings from some of my blessings. And as Imam Ali hears this happening, the hadith says, like an eagle coming down onto his nest to feed its children, Imam Ali rushes to the aid of his follower. For Prophet Noah, he sends a representative. He He said his son. For his Shia, for his follower, isn't that a follower who didn't even have more good than he had bad in his record? Imam Ali let the eagle cast himself down and says, "Oh, my community, my followers, keep your good for yourselves. I'll come to the aid of this follower of mine. I'll help him." Imam Ali says, "Oh Allah, for the sake of me and for the sake of my position before you, forgive this man and let him into heaven." And Allah bless that man into heaven for the sake of Imam Ali. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, we have this blessing of our Ahlul Bayt. We've been told to connect to them because their connection to them means that we're going to be successful in this life, and most importantly of all, we're going to be successful in the eternal hereafter. Allah wishes for us to connect to them. In fact, one of the best ways to connect to them is the bounty and the blessing of ziyarah, to say salam upon them. But how? Go visit them. Have you been to ziyarah? It's too overwhelming. When I go, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to say. It's so overwhelming that the only thing that I can do is I can go to the bookshelf they have next to the grave of Imam Ali, of Imam Hussein, of Hazrat Abbas, of any one of the Imams, or even the companions of the Imams who had a special place. I go to that bookshelf, I pick up the book of ziyarah because I don't know what to say. I'm overwhelmed. And I open that ziyarah and I say, Assalamu alayka ya amin Allah fi khanbih. See, brothers and sisters, if I told you there's a program going on, it's in the DC area, go. But sometimes you get the address, you pop it into your GPS, and the GPS takes you directly to where you need to go. You make a wrong turn, it says, no, come right back. Let me reroute you. The Ahlul Bayt themselves offer us this way to connect to them, this way to perform their ziyarah properly. I want to say salam to Imam Ali, cousin of the Prophet. Ali ibn Abi Talib. I see in Ziyarah Jama. Imam Hadi says, if you want to call on to the Ahlul Bayt, Assalamu alaikum ya Ahlul Bayt al-Nabawa. Salam upon you, peace be upon you, O family of the Prophet. And the ore of the message of Allah, in the place in which revelation from Allah descends onto earth. This is how you should call upon the Ahlul Bayt. And you do so, that's the GPS that the Imams are giving us. You do so, you're going to get directly to us. You're going to connect directly with us. Imam Mahdi, peace be upon him, has a hadith from himself. We have a hadith from Imam Mahdi himself, and he says, the darkness of night scare you? Do the problems that you face bother you? Like our dear brother Mateen said, does your stress overwhelm you? When you feel the stress, when you feel the pressure from your enemies, when you feel the crushing blows of life, sit down and look with your heart. Open your heart's eye to me, the Imam of your time, and begin. Salamun ala ali Yasin. Say this ziyarah to me, and I will connect directly to you. I will connect you to Allah. Brothers and sisters, ziyarah is a way for us to connect with our Ahlul Bayt, but also, I mentioned ziyarah Jama'ah, I mentioned ziyarah Ali Yasin. Google them if you be so brave. These ziyarat show us beyond just how to connect to the Imam, they tell us who the Imams are. Like Ali Razan and Bushra both shared with us the characteristics of the Imams. We get them from these hadith in which the Imams introduce themselves to us. Now, every day of the week is devoted to one of the Imams in the form of a ziyarah. Today is Saturday. Saturday is devoted to the Prophet himself. Now, Arabic and Farsi make it easy for us to know which day is whose. Because if you start with Saturday, the next day is Sunday. And after the Prophet comes Imam Ali and Lady Fatima. Sunday is devoted to Imam Ali and to Lady Fatima, peace be upon her. But of course, in Arabic and in Farsi, Sunday and Sunday is one Saturday. Monday and Monday is two Saturdays. Tuesdays, 3 Saturdays. Now that 1, 2, 3 numbering in Farsi and in Arabic of the days is very helpful. Because the Imams, we can follow whose day it is when we do that ziyarah. Open the maqatir. Go to du'as.org. Look at the daily recitation tab. And every day of the week, Saturday, the Prophet. Sunday, Imam Ali and Lady Fatima. Monday, which happens to be the second day of the week in Arabic, 2 Imams, Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. Tuesday, the third day of the week, Imam Sajjad, Imam Baqir, Imam Sadiq. Wednesday, fourth day of the week, Imam Musa, Imam Rida, Imam Jawad, Imam Hadi. Thursday, the fifth day of the week, we don't have 5 more Imams left. Thursday is specific to Imam Hassan al-Askari, the father of the Imam of our time. And then comes Friday, the day of Imam Mahdi, the day of connecting with the Imam of our time. And I labeled this talk the Friday conversation. And I'm also looking at the time, and I don't have time to delve into this ziyarah and go into the meanings of it. That was kind of an afterthought. I thought if there was time, I would like to share with you some of the meanings of this ziyarah. I will share with you just a few things, because it's important. We begin by saying, Salam to you, O proof of Allah. Your presence draws people to Allah. Proof of Allah upon earth. Ya hujjat Allah fi ardih. Assalamu alayka ya nur Allah alladhi yahtadi bihi al-muhtadun. Like Ayyadullah said, like the poem from Sister Bushra, the Imam's light is something that guides us. Those who receive guidance, alladhi yahtadi bihi al-muhtadun. Those who receive guidance, they got it from the Imam, according to the ziyarah, which is a hadith. I never met my Imam. I never saw Imam Mahdi. I never heard his voice. That's the thing, though. The very fact that we are guided is because of the grace of Imam Mahdi. My dear friends that I see here and there that don't have the light of guidance of the Ahlul Bayt in their hearts, my job, my duty, my responsibility is to connect them to the Imam of their time. Because through him, they too will receive guidance, whether they realize it or not. We may not realize it, but that light of Allah that people receive guidance from is the Imam of our time. And we say, today is Friday, the day in which your reappearance is expected. We expect it. In fact, in this ziyarah, we say, Imam Mahdi, I'm one of those that expects your reappearance. I'm awaiting. I'm awaiting your reappearance. And then a sentence later we say, oh, I ask Allah to bestow His blessings upon Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. And I ask Allah to place me among those who will await you. Because awaiting means acceptance as well. Oh Allah, accept me into that special group of people who are living lives so pure, so proper, that if Imam Mahdi comes tomorrow, they go to the door and say, please, welcome to my home. Please, let me host you. Not those that say, Mahdi's here. I didn't know my namaz yet. I didn't do my salat yet. No, not those who are worried about what's my background. Well, I don't have enough to show for it when Imam Mahdi is here. No, I'm awaiting Imam Mahdi so much. We're asking Allah. We're waiting so much. Ask Allah to accept us, to those select few who are so proper in their lives, so pious in their lives, that they are truly awaiting your reappearance. That when you're here, they're not embarrassed to say, I got nothing to show for my Islam. When you're here, they have the benefit of saying, Imam Mahdi, after all that I've done, can I now serve you in your presence? And this is the day, your reappearance. This is the day we say in the ziyarah, that the ease and the solace comes for believers, and the day that death comes to disbelief. It's important, this one controversial bit I want to share with you, and I'll stop talking about the translation of the ziyarah of Imam Mahdi. Death comes to disbelief. In fact, the ziyarah doesn't say to disbelieve. The translation is death comes to disbelief. The ziyarah says to disbelievers. Really, it's important for us to realize this point. Imam Mahdi and his reappearance is said to follow the path of the Prophet. The Prophet didn't go willy-nilly to kill anyone. The Prophet didn't embark upon conquest. It was those who took Islam after him, who took the reins of government after him that did. The Prophet didn't go and attack people for conquest. Imam Mahdi is not out there to attack anyone. When he reappears, he will follow the sunnah of the Prophet. He will take the means of diplomacy. He will spread the message of Islam. He will spread the message of the Prophet of Islam, his forefather, and through that means say, this is now the time. Allah has promised me to bring an end to disbelief. and anyone who stands before Imam Mahdi at that point. After the truth has come to them, after their aql and their intellect has come to completion and to fruition, Imam Mahdi will not stop at anyone's refusal. How many wars, how many people have been killed, how much bloodshed have we seen just for conquest, just for riches? And those who wish to stand for that style of conquest at the time of Imam Mahdi will fall. That's what Imam Mahdi's ziyarah means when we say, the death of disbelief at your hands. Brothers and sisters, I'm holding up what you're going to get tonight, inshallah. We tried to print a copy of the translation next to the ziyarah itself. So when you walk out the door and to your left, not during intermission, but at the very end of our program, you take your the bags that we prepared as a thank you for coming to attend this program. You'll find in it a copy of the ziyarah to perform on Fridays. And I want to conclude on one thing. 124,000 prophets. 124,000 prophets came to this earth. Yet, when we read the Quran, we don't see their names. We just see two handfuls. We have a select few prophets whom we know anything about. Particularly a special part of the world too. The East Asians. In the New World, so to speak, North America, South America, the indigenous people, we know these places must have had prophets of their own. Every group, Allah says, for every group He bestowed upon them prophets. What of them? We don't know their story. One of the reasons is because our scholars say the prophets whose mention comes in the Quran, it's in the Quran for a practical reason, for a purpose. Their names are in the Quran because there's a connection that we can make, a lesson that we can learn, a lesson that the ummah, the people of the Prophet can learn. Because when we get to Prophet Yusuf and his father, Prophet Yaqub, Joseph and Jacob, we're told in our hadith that Imam Mahdi has a connection to Prophet Joseph. And the similarity between Imam Mahdi and Prophet Yusuf, Prophet Joseph, is that they will both go into hiding. They will both go into disappearance. Let's make this connection for a second. Imam Mahdi goes into disappearance and there are people waiting for him, us. When Joseph went into hiding, meaning when he was ripped away from his family, the person awaiting Joseph was his father Jacob. Jacob cried so intensely for not having his son with him. He cried so deeply for not having Joseph that he lost his sight. That is a true muntalib. That is a true awaiter. That is a true person who is expecting a beloved. It said that when the brothers of Joseph, what do we do? Our father has lost his eyesight. He's cried so much. They remembered they took the shirt of Prophet Yusuf. They had his shirt. And they took this shirt and handed it to their father. Father, hold this. Remember your son with his shirt. It smells like my little boy, my baby boy that I lost. He takes the shirt and he rubs it over his blind eyes. And the shirt of Prophet Yusuf, peace be upon him, brings the eyesight back to Prophet Yaqub. That's the significance of the story. The significance is that if we are awaiting Imam Mahdi, just like the shirt of Prophet Joseph, not Prophet Joseph himself, just like the shirt of Prophet Joseph is a connection that Prophet Yaqub is making with that person that he's longing for. Allah extends to us all of these shirts of Prophet Joseph. Allah extends to us these excuses, these reasons. You want to connect to your Imam? 15th of Shaban. It said that the eve of the 15th of Shaban, after Laylatul Qadr, is the most sacred of all nights in the whole entire calendar. You want to connect with your Imam? God's giving you an excuse. He's giving you a reason. Go for it. Grab onto it. No, is that not enough? Every week, brothers and sisters, every week, open your Mafati, open your apps, open your browsers, pick up this ziyarah. Is an excuse for you right there. It's the day of Imam Mahdi. Here's an excuse. Connect with your Imam. Brothers and sisters, every Friday, let's all sit down. Turn the outside world off to ourselves for a moment and pick up this ziyarah. Learn from Imam Mahdi and have this back and forth with Imam Mahdi. You don't hear the responses. But there's no way even to say alaykum as-salam, to respond to as-salam is wajib. There's no way the Imam is not saying alaykum as-salam to us when we say salam alaykum. And make that connection with your Imam Mahdi, because the same way that Imam Ali will come to the aid of that poor soul in the day of judgment, just because he was his follower, brothers and sisters, when the day Imam Mahdi reappears, and then the day of judgment, we want to look before the grace and the presence of our Creator and say, Oh Allah, we followed you when you told us to connect with the Imam of our time. We connected with the Imam of our time. Thank you so much for your time. جميعا السلام الله عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you very much for that. As always, amazing short speeches by Mahdi. I'm a very poor listener, so what I understood is that Google Maps was your best option of getting here. If you didn't use it, you are lost. There were other things in it too, but I forgot. So this is the second best portion of the program, the intermission, because you don't have to hear my voice anymore. Now, I always have to make this warning. It's a 15, my dear Iranian brothers and sisters, 15, not 15, 15 intermission. And then we're going to have to come back. We have very short amount of time, so we have to come back quickly and complete the program. So 15 minutes, please get some refreshments and enjoy your time, mingle, and then we'll be back and we have more programming for you guys. Brothers and sisters who are still outside, if I can get your attention and somehow convince you to come back inside to listen to my voice, I'll give you candy to suffer a long life. If you guys come in the next 30 seconds, then I'd like to personally thank everybody who's here right now and listen to my warning of the 15 minutes. I appreciate all of you more than I appreciate the people outside. They can't hear me, so it's okay. Matthew, can you make an announcement? Alrighty, thank you so much for coming back approximately on time, close enough. For Muslim Standard Time, you guys did amazing. MashaAllah. Let's give a loud clap for yourselves. So our next performance is, I guess, by our youngest performer of the night, and he is one of our favorite. If not to discount the rest, but he's one of our favorites because not only is he here to give us a poem, but he's here as the son of the previous speaker. So Muhammad Hussein is a second grader. He loves to play basketball like his Baba Jun and Amu Jun. And he also trains in Taekwondo. Do not get in a fight with him because he's a purple belt. Okay? And tonight he's going to be singing a song for us by the name of Sanat Muhammad. So let's greet him with a loud salawat.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Salam, salam, salam to you, our dear Imam. Salam, salam, all without know where you are. We wish you joy and peace and calm. Salam, salam, you are our earth, our sun, our moon. Salam, salam, we wish to see you very soon. Our moms and dads and we all say, Salam, salam. We all wish you a happy birthday. Salawat.
clap, please. Beautiful. He did even better than his dad. No one laughed. Or no one laughed. All right, that was a joke. Matthew did a great job too. So now we arrive to a great portion of the program because you don't have to hear my voice for a very long time. Our keynote presentation, which we have introduced multiple times till now. Sayyid Matthew Mudarrisi will be speaking in a moment. He is a scholar, a speaker, an author. He is one of the most prolific and sought-after speakers on matters of Islamic faith, spirituality, theology, and Shia beliefs. His publications include books and articles in Arabic and in English, such as The Lost Testament, What Christians Don't Know About Jesus, and Our Beliefs, The Fundamental Tenets of Islam. Sayyid Mahdi comes from a family with a deep legacy in Islamic scholarship, which includes his father, Sayyid Hatim al-Mudarrisi, and his uncle, who is one of our contemporary Manaj al-Tabligh, Ayatollah Sayyid Karim Mudarrisi. In addition to his work as a scholar, author, and speaker, he is also the founder of Ahlul Bayt TV in the London of United Kingdom. As a side note, don't forget, we'll have a question and answer session with the Sayyid at the end of the program. So again, write down your questions and keep them prepared. We are honored to have him as a speaker tonight, and please join me in welcoming him to the stage with a loud salawat. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين الغرر الميامين، سيما بقية الله في الأراضين وحجته على الخلائق أجمعين، سيدنا وإمام زماننا وصاحب نعمتنا وولي أمرنا مهدي هذه الأمة وطاووس أهل الجنة الحجة بن الحسن العسكري، فداء أرواح العالمين. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, first of all, I'd like to extend my felicitations and congratulations on the most auspicious of festivities in our calendar. The birth of the Savior, the birth of hope, the advent of the one that was promised by God to every single one of his prophets, messengers, and apostles. The one who was promised to come at the end of time, to inaugurate, to cut the ribbon to a building that was built by having brick laid on top of another brick by every single godly man and woman in history. And because this event coincided with a very holy week as far as several great world religions are concerned, it's worth noting that in the same week, Jews celebrated Passover, Christians celebrated Easter, and we celebrated the birth of Imam Zaman. He is in a way, one of the most important threads that connect all of God's divinely inspired religions. Think about that for a moment. World religions don't share many things. I mean, broadly speaking, you might say that they believe in God, they share belief in a creator, they share belief in some form of divine inspiration, right? And they also share belief that at the end of days, at some point, God will have to intervene in order to save humanity from itself. God will have to step in after human beings have tried, tested, and failed at every conceivable idea they could come up with. At some point, God will have to bring about what the Imams call دولتنا آخر الدول, our reign, our sovereignty, our authority, our government will be the last. It'll be the one that will ultimately fix all of the flaws, all of the problems that were unfixable. And so, the birth of the Imam, celebrating his birth, especially since we are seated here in an academic building, an institution of higher learning, it's important to note the fact that we share belief in the awaited Savior. Of course, we're going to perhaps disagree on some of the details, just as we disagree on the attributes and characteristics of God. We disagree on who the prophets were, whether they were infallible or not. So these disagreements are natural given the passage of time, given the fact that Judaism is a 4,000-year-old religion. Of course, there is going to be distortions, just as there are distortions in the religion of Islam itself. And so, it's an important acknowledgement that has to be made, right? And so, I'm going to start from right there. The common ground that we share with other religions. And to do that, I'll take you to an individual who I have a very strong affinity to. Someone that perhaps most of you are not too familiar with, but I think it's critical that we get to know this individual. He is considered by the Catholic Church as the first pope. Does anyone know who the first pope was? The first pope, if you look him up, if you Google him, was a man by the name of Peter. And St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican is in fact named after him because they believe that not only was he martyred and crucified in Rome and laid to rest in a sarcophagus that was later discovered by the church, and so they named the church in his honor, but that he was also the first pope. That's very important. Unfortunately, however, in the Christian tradition, Peter doesn't feature as prominently as you would hope, right? Even though, if you look at the books of the Bible, and I'll skim through this very, very quickly. If you look at Matthew 16, or if you look at John 21, the Gospel according to John 21, you'll find that Peter has been identified by Jesus almost as a successor, as an heir, as someone who's going to take the reins after Jesus. According to our belief, Peter was without a shadow of doubt the appointed heir to Jesus Christ. In fact, according to the hadith of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Peter was Jesus' cousin, obviously from his mother's side. Ibn Khalat Isa alayhi salam. Now, take that and add it to what we already share with the Christians. That Peter was the first person to believe in Jesus. Think about that for a moment. The first of the disciples to embrace the message of Jesus was Peter. His name wasn't Peter. His name was Simon, son of Jonah. In Arabic, his name is Shaban. But in Arabic, we add a suffix to his name. We say Shamu'un. Anyone? Safa. Ahsant. Shamu'un al-Safa. What does Safa mean? For those of you who have been to Umrah or Hajj, you'll remember that there are two hills, if you like. They used to be mountains, that now they're just a couple of hills right next to the sacred house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called As-Safa wal-Marwa. Safa in Arabic means rock. As a matter of fact, the word Peter comes from Petra in Greek, which literally means rock. Where did this come from? How was Simon renamed Peter? Again, go back to Matthew 16, go back to John 21. Jesus is said to have asked Simon. He says to him, Simon, do you believe in me? Who am I to you? So there's a conversation that ensues. In the end, when Simon has proven not only his firm conviction and belief in Jesus, but his loyalty to him and his cause and his mission, Jesus says to him, Simon, you are my Petra. You are my rock. And then he says to him, upon you I shall build my church. And the gates of Hades will not reach it, meaning the gates of hell will not have access to the church that I will build upon you. You are the foundation of my mission. You're the rock of my church. Then, in John 21, Jesus says to Simon, now renamed Peter, he says to him, Peter, do you love me? So Peter naturally responds by saying, yes, I do. He said, do you love me more than they do? He said, yes, I do, my Lord. So Jesus then says to him, then shepherd my flock. Look after my lamb. Meaning, Jesus is literally appointing Simon, Peter, as his heir, as his successor. Of course, there's a story which I'll mention parenthetically. It's quite interesting. Where there's a Jewish man who comes to the city of Medina. He enters the city and he says, where is your prophet? I heard that there was a self-proclaimed prophet who declared that he was sent from God to deliver his final message. They told him, well, unfortunately, our prophet has passed away. He said, well, where is his successor? They said, well, about that, our prophet didn't have a successor. He kind of just left it to his community for them to get together, maybe select a few people. They could gather around under this little shed that we call Saqifat Bani Sa'ida, and they selected someone among themselves. Of course, there was a scuffle, there was a fist fight, some people got killed, right? Tribal chiefs were assassinated, but it was a very civil, kind of beautiful process. You know, it was like the 6th century's version of the Electoral College, if you like. So he said, you know what? Your prophet was a false prophet. And you people are a bunch of idiots. They said, well, why don't we have a word with the person who was eventually selected as the successor? There he is. He's on top of the pulpit. He's delivering a sermon. So he said, you know what? I might as well come all this way. He goes into the mosque. He sees the first self-proclaimed Khalifa. He says to him, did your prophet appoint a successor? He said, no. You know, people just came and they flocked to me and they're all like, you need to be the Khalifa. And I'm all like, no, you know, just a little humble brag. I'm too busy. دعوني فلست بخيركم وعلي فيكم. Ali's a much better candidate, but you know, if you insist. He said, you know what, your prophet was a false prophet. You're a liar. You're all a bunch of idiots. Bye. As he's walking out, someone, Abu Dhar in fact, goes up to him. He says to him, you want to speak to the real successor of the prophet? I'll take it. So he takes him to the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the one who was placed under house arrest for 25 years, no less. When he went to the Imam, he said, I have one question for you. I don't care about your prophet's message. I don't care what he preached. I don't care how many wars and battles he engaged in. One question. did he appoint a successor or not? Because as far as we're concerned, that is one litmus test to identify a true prophet from a false prophet. The Imam said, well, I have your answer. Our prophet, just like every other prophet, appointed a successor. But his nation, just like every previous nation, rejected that successor. Peter was this incredibly special man, first believer, first pope, cousin of Jesus, appointed by him to shepherd the flock, the rock on which the church was to be built. Jesus at one point said to him, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loosen on earth will be loosened in heaven. What does that mean? It means that you have the same authority as I do. But of course, the position of Peter in modern Christianity is this nice guy that is one of the apostles. He's kind of cool, but to have any position of authority? No. Authority belongs to the guy who never met Jesus, a man named Paul, sometimes referred to as the Apostle Paul or Saint Paul. Never met Jesus, persecuted Christians, slaughtered them left, right, and center, got into a fist fight with Peter, at some point said, I have not learned a thing from the apostles. So he never learned anything from Jesus. He never learned anything from the apostles. So where do you get your information from? How is it that 17 of the Bible's 27 chapters are attributed to you? More than half, almost 2/3 of the Bible is attributed to Paul. He said, well, I received divine revelation. Jesus speaks through me. In other words, he appointed himself as a new prophet. Anyway, we're not here to pick fights with our Christian brethren. The whole point of this was to illustrate the esteemed position of Peter alayhi salam. Why? Because Peter is also the ancestor of Narjis, the mother of Imam Zaman, brothers and sisters. The Imam, we've all heard this before, I'm sure you're familiar with this. The Imam is, for lack of a better description, is his own little melting pot. Imam Zaman, from his mother's side, traces his lineage back to Peter. And from Peter, he traces his lineage back to Isaac. In other words, for the first time, the two lineages of Isaac and Ishmael meet in the Mahdi. These two prophetic genealogies. From his father's side, he traces lineage back to the holy messenger of Allah, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And of course, through him, back to a long line of divinely inspired, pure apostles, messengers, prophets, the best of the best. وَتَقَلُّبَكَ السَّاجِدِينَ. Prostrator after prostrator, worshipper after worshipper. That, brothers and sisters, is how, or part of the reason why when the Imam comes, he will be embraced by everyone. Jesus will be his ambassador to Christendom, according to our traditions. The Imam will be embraced. I remember I was at a gathering where someone asked me, he said, your Mahdi is, and the person came from a Christian background, your Mahdi is a Muslim at the end of the day, right? And given the rampant Islamophobia that we see in this day and age, how are people going to listen to him? I said, look, when he comes, not only will he have the genealogy, not only will he have the ancestry, not only will he have the credibility of being related to all these great prophets, unifying all these great religions. Not only that, but he will come at a time of such utter darkness and desperation that people will embrace him, they will flock towards him without much regard to his religious identity. It's not about that. It's about a man who's here at a time when the earth is filled with injustice and oppression. بعد أن ملئت ظُلْمًا وَجَبْرًا. And He's here to undo all of that. He's here to fill it with justice, with equity, and with a sense of harmony and humanity, right? What will He do? How does He create the gravitas? How do people gravitate towards His light and His flag and His standard? Well, the Imam will do many things, brothers and sisters. And I'm going to take you on a little journey here. And I want you to imagine. Just imagine the world that's been promised. Again, this is a world where God Almighty Himself will step in, intervene, using His promised Messiah to come and cleanse the earth of oppression and injustice and create a world where God's justice can be manifested within the limitations of physical reality. Where God's glory and God's blessings and bliss will be awarded to those who are good, and God's punishment will be dealt to those who are evil within what is permitted within physical reality. Right? Obviously, God's true justice, God's true love for those who are good can only be truly manifested in the afterlife, where there's a new set of physics over there, where we're not limited by time and space the way we are now, where we don't get bored and quickly tire from even the most pleasurable of activities. That's how the world is right now. Right? You can have the best food in the world, $1,000 plate at the most posh restaurants anywhere in the world. But after like half an hour, you get fed up. You can no longer even bear to see the food. You can't wait for it to be taken away, only to be then replaced by another course and another course. لا يملأ عيني ابن آدم إلا التراب, the hadith says. The only thing that can satisfy us, meaning the only thing that can give us a sense of true happiness in this world, is when our eyes are filled with dust. In other words, when we die, do we then feel a sense of satisfaction? In this world, things are limited. And so God's remuneration and God's blessings and God's punishment can only truly be manifested in a world free from the restraints of physics. But in this world, Allah made a promise. He says in the Quran, إِنَّا لَنَنْصُرُ رُسُلَنَا وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَيَوْمَ يَقُومُ الْأَشْهَادُ. We verily, this is the royal we of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, we shall surely grant victory to who? To our prophets and to the believers. Not just the prophets, but also those who suffered in the cause of those prophets. Those who contributed to the spread of kindness and compassion and suffered under the iron fist of oppression. Allah has promised them reprieve in this world, brothers and sisters. نَنْصُرُ رُسُلَنَا وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا where? In paradise? Well, that's obvious. فِي الْحَيَاةِ, in this world, they'll get a taste of the joy that comes with service to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this world. وَيَوْمَ يَقُومُ الْأَشْهَادُ. But their true reward, obviously, is reserved for the day when the witnesses shall rise, meaning on the day of judgment. So, I want you to imagine, using scriptural references, using the traditions of the Anbiya. I'm not making any of this up. Just try and imagine what kind of a world the Imam would create. And the reason I want to talk about this is because we could all use a little hope. I mean, you watch the news, or you follow social trends. You look at the decadent morality that's plaguing the planet. You look at the oppression that's happening everywhere. You look at the failed attempts of mankind to restore some sense of justice, some sense of peace, that keep failing miserably one after the other. The United Nations was created for what purpose? It was created in the aftermath of World War II. And the idea was that the best way for us to stop bloodshed, the carnage, the death and destruction, is for nations to get together, to talk to one another, to engage in dialogue. Great idea. Brilliant. So of course they did that. All the nations joined up. They got together. One headquarter in New York, another one, regional one, in Geneva, Switzerland. Did they stop all wars? Sure. They stopped all wars in Europe and the United States, North America. That's it. As for the rest of the world, it continues to languish in pain and misery. More people have died in wars after the establishment and founding of the United Nations than those who died during both the First World War and the Second. Even Europe wasn't immune from this. Does anybody remember the Balkan Wars? Does anyone remember Srebrenica? Does anyone remember the massacre of Muslims in that part of the world? The point here is, we need and we could use some hope. It's easy to lose hope, and we don't want to get there, right? And one way to ensure that we don't lose hope is that we keep talking about the Imam. We talk about the world he's going to create, and we talk about the fact that his return is imminent. We pray for his return. Traditions tell us that only those who continue to pray for the Imam will be immune from losing their way, from losing their moral compass, and from giving up all. What we need to remember is that we're not left on our own. We're not all alone in this world. We're not all alone. There's a famous story. I won't go through the story in detail, but Sayyid Abu Hassan al-Asfahani, who was a great marja, leader of the entire Shia world, he tells the story from the time when he was much younger, studying in the Hawza. And he says that my father was a farmer, just a simple man, farmer, over 100 years ago. But he says, home was still home, right? You still have your mother to look after, you have your father to ensure that all your needs are attended to. But he says, I set out to study and to seek knowledge at the end of the day. It's a big sacrifice, brothers and sisters, but we all must make it. If we're going to safeguard our faith and our religion, if we're going to look after the next generation, if we're going to raise children who are faithful, who are believers, who are good, who are moral, we need to seek knowledge of them. We need to learn what our imams have told us, as opposed to suffering from this modern disease, which I like to refer to as hadithophobia. The idea that, oh, hadith, you don't know what's authentic and what's not. You don't know if the hadith book that you're picking up is good or not. These are the words of the imams, brothers and sisters. Let's say there is 1% that's not authentic. Learn from the other 99%. Why have we been brainwashed into thinking that hadith is this dirty word that needs to be avoided at all costs? Anyway, he made the sacrifice. He went to the Hawza. But of course, Hawza back in the day, the Islamic seminary, was a tough place. Just as it is today. Very tough. Mudabasa Afghani was a teacher in the holy city of Qom. He was actually the father-in-law of the contemporary Marja, Sheikh Ishaq Tayyab. He was a great scholar, someone that many people benefited from. People still benefit from his recorded lessons. He says that when I first went to Najaf, I didn't have a place to stay. This is how tough it was, brothers and sisters. When you see a alim, pay them the respect that they deserve, because these are things they had to go through. He says, I went to Najaf, I didn't have a place to stay. So where did he go? To one of the Wadi Salam, which is the world's biggest cemetery, because in there you have these little tombs And in the tombs, there's like a little shade and something to protect you from like the cold and what have you. So he would spend the night in a tomb in a cemetery. He said, one morning I woke up and I was really thirsty. And so I noticed a stream of water right outside the tomb. So I reached down and I drank from the water because again, it was really thirsty. But I noticed there was something off about the water. Even though it looked all right, there was something off about it. Maybe the smell, maybe I don't know. He said, so I got curious. I thought, what did I just drink? So he says, I followed the stream all the way back to another tomb where the water was being used to wash a dead body. Anyway, Sayyid Abu Hassan Isfahan, he says that I went to the Islamic seminary. They give you like a little room, a dorm, if you like, but not much else. He says, so I was there one night and it was so cold, I was freezing. And I didn't have food to eat. And I really needed some soap, which I didn't have and I couldn't afford. He said, right when I was like confused and not knowing what to do, my father walked in. He said, when my father walked in, he's like, what are you doing here? What was wrong with your life? You were living with us, you were okay. You were going to be another farmer just like your dad. Why would you have to drop everything and come to this place where you don't even have soap, where you don't have a blanket, and you're freezing to death? Sahib Nadari, he said to him, you don't have anyone looking after you here. Come back home. So Sayyid Abu Hassan Isfahan says, that really shook me. And obviously, my father stayed for a while, then he went home. And he said, listen, you still have home, you can always come back. He said, so that night I left. I left the dorm, just looking for some fresh air, trying to change the atmosphere around me. He says, while I was walking, I saw this person who approached me. He said to me, Sayyid, I've got a little bit of money for you. Here, take this cash. Also, by the way, there is soap in a cupboard in the room adjacent to yours. So I took the money. I was really happy. Now I got a little bit of money. I can buy some wood. I can warm myself. And I thought, well, great, now I have soap. So I started walking back to my dorm when I suddenly realized, how did that guy know that I was looking for soap? How did he give me an address as to where I could find it? Why would he give me money? A total stranger. Here's money so you can stay warm? He said, so I ran after him. I couldn't quite catch him, but I heard him say his last words. He said, so they don't tell you that you have no one to look after you. Brothers and sisters, the Imam himself says, Inna lasna nasina lidhikr. I may be neglectful towards the Imam. I may be forgetful towards the Imam. But he never forgets about us. He never leaves us alone. In 2003, I might as well mention this. Remember the first mass document leak from WikiLeaks? It was back in 2003. One of the documents that was leaked was a cable where the head of the British MI6, Military Intelligence Department number 6, which is the equivalent of the CIA, if you like, was speaking to his American counterpart. And in it, he said that I was talking to Prince Bandar bin Sultan. Does anyone recognize that name? Bandar bin Sultan was the Saudi ambassador to Washington. And, you know, he's a royal, well-respected, very powerful, this playboy of a man, knew his way around the corridors of power. He was telling the head of the MI6, listen carefully. He said, you know, the Shia, nowadays, it's 2003, right? So the Shia, they think they own the world now? They think they own Iraq now? He said, in 10 years' time, may God help the Shia. Which is what? A blatant threat. He's saying in 10 years' time, the Shia will be gone. In other words, if we couldn't defeat them militarily, we got some tricks up our sleeves. We have Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, we have Zarqawi, we have ISIS, we have Nusra. We have quite a number of tricks up our sleeve that we can use in order to, all these pawns that we can use in order to destroy the Shia. May God help the Shia. This is one of those moments where I can almost hear echoes of the voice of the Imam. إِنَّا لَسْنَا نَاسِينَ بِذِكْرِ وَلَا مُهْمِلِينَ لِمُرَاعَاتِكُمْ وَلَوْلَا ذَلِكَ لَأَخَذَتْكُمُ اللَّأْوَاءُ وَاصْطَنَمَكُمُ الْأَعْدَاءُ. Had it not been for our care for you, you would have been uprooted by your enemies. You would have been completely destroyed by your foes and adversaries. Now, let me go back to what I was trying to do, which is to paint a picture, to give hope. Right? There's a lot of room for hope, even though it's easy to slip into utter hopelessness. I remember hearing someone talk about fire. Just think about this. He was like, fire and the ability to discover, to control, to harness, to extract energy from fire is probably the single greatest technological leap in the history of mankind. Why? Because with fire, you can keep warm. With fire, you have light in the dark. With fire, you can cook food. It's using fire that's allowed us to sanitize utensils and surgical equipment and other means of staying healthy. It was fire that was harnessed in the internal combustion engine that allowed you and I to drive to this location. Without it, we wouldn't have cars. It was fire that was again harnessed and the energy used in order to fly me across the Pacific Ocean to be here in your presence. Without fire, human migration would have been almost impossible. Without fire, the Bronze Age would never have occurred, the Iron Age would never have happened, and the Industrial Revolution would never have transpired. Fire is at the center of it all. Now think about this. The discovery of fire, the harnessing of its energy was so critical for the advancement of human civilization. So you can only imagine if we were not only able to harness fire, but to harness the energy of a star. If we were able to somehow take control of, say, our own star in the solar system, the sun, and use the energy, we would have discovered fire again. Only this time, this fire gives us an unlimited supply of energy. This time, this fire can bring infinite benefits to human civilization. Allow us to traverse the universe. Now imagine, as the hadith says, أَمَّا وَجْهُ الْإِنْتِفَاعِ بِهِ فِي غَيْبَتِهِ كَالْإِنْتِفَاعِ بِالشَّمْسِ إِذَا غَيْبَتِ السَّحَابِ. After a long, dark, cold winter, brothers and sisters, وَأَشْرَقَتِ الْأَرْضُ بِنُورِ رَبِّهَا. The earth will be illuminated with the light of its Lord. What's this verse talking about? أَشْرَقَتِ الْأَرْضُ بِنُورِ رَبِّهَا. The light of the Lord will shine through the earth, will fill the entire earth. Are we talking about paradise? The Quran itself says no. Why? Because in Surah Al-Insan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا يرون فيها شمسا ولا زمهريرا. Those who are in paradise don't see the sun. There is no sun and there is no cold. So the verse that says that the earth will be filled with the light of its Lord is not talking about paradise. What's it talking about? About this world. Is it talking about the sun? Of course not. Because Allah says that the earth will be filled with the light of its Lord. If we're talking about the sun, we already have the sun day in and day out. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the awaited Savior, brothers and sisters. Which is why the hadith says, يستغني الناس بنوره عن نور الشمس. People will no longer need the light of the sun because they have the light of the Mahdi, because they have the light of their Lord, the holy Imam. If you think about the greatest discoveries in the history of mankind, brothers and sisters, you'll find that a lot of the critical advancements, technological discoveries and innovations were the product of accidents. Sometimes they were the product of mistakes. For example, did you know that the X-ray machine was discovered and developed through an accident, a mistake? They weren't looking to build it, but they did. And I don't want to get into detail here. The microwave oven, its discovery and its innovation came as a result of a mistake. Penicillin, which is considered to be one of the most important reasons for mankind to flourish, one of the greatest inventions in the history of the world was penicillin, and it came about by an accident because the person who discovered it left their food outside for too long, and bacteria and mold took over the food. And so here's what I'm trying to say. Listen carefully. Sometimes some of the greatest innovations and discoveries and paradigm shifts, they come as a result of a simple formula. So imagine if God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through His Imam, through His vicegerent, through His representative, decides to resolve and solve every scientific riddle. Every question that's puzzled mankind throughout the centuries. I mean, look how the snail pace of our progress. I'm not taking away from scientific exploration. But what I'm saying is it took us thousands of years to finally take a fuzzy, weird picture of the closest black hole to us. Now imagine if Imam al-Zaman comes and he provides us with what they call zero-point energy, where you can use a cubic meter of salt water that you get from the ocean to provide energy for the entire planet for a year. Imagine if the Imam came, as the hadiths tell us, that if you consider the collective knowledge of mankind to be 2 units, the Imam will add another 25 units to that. Imagine the Imam will come with answers and solutions to all of these problems, all of these riddles, all of these puzzles. He will provide us with new sources of knowledge. In his time, we'll be able to explore the vastness of the universe. We'll be able to traverse the galaxies and move from star to star, from stellar system to stellar system. As Imam al-Sadiq told us, إِنَّ مِنْ وَرَاءِ عَالَمِكُمْ هَذَا أَلْفُ عَالَمٍ. Beyond this world of yours, there is 1,000 other worlds. وَإِنَّ مِنْ وَرَاءِ آدَمِكُمْ هَذَا أَلْفُ آدَمٍ. And beyond this human species of yours on this planet, there's 1,000 other intelligent species out there. Humans, Adams, the Imam calls them. In his time, brothers and sisters, will be able to discover all of this. His era will be one of marvelous discovery. His era will be a time when, as the hadiths tell us, man and beast will coexist. You can have a pet lion, not advisable, but if that's something you want to do, you can do that, and the lion will not devour its human companion. The hadiths tell us all of these things. Brothers and sisters, it'll be a bright, beautiful future, which is why I think each and every single one of us has an obligation, a moral duty to preach this good news to the world. I might have alluded to this last year for those of you who made it. We are the only nation that actually has a positive outcome for the future of the world. Every other scenario, every other vision for the future of mankind is in fact quite cataclysmic and post-apocalyptic, and we're talking about thermonuclear holocaust, and we're talking about some asteroid hitting the earth and eviscerating all forms of human life. Whether you look it up in science or you read fiction, right? It's all bad. None of these scenarios provide a future that is hunky-dory, that's beautiful, that's warm and fuzzy. Except us, except the Shia of Ahlul Bayt, except the followers of Imam al-Zaman, and those who preach the good news of his advent and arrival. Tell the world that the Imam will come. Of course, he has a mandate. I said this the other day at the University of Houston. He has a mandate to save the people who have been yearning for him, who have been longing for his arrival. He has a divine mandate to save those who are being oppressed in his name, and in the name of the Ahlul Bayt, and in the name of his grandfather, Amir al-Mu'mineen. But that's not the only reason he will come. He will come to create peace on this earth for everyone. For everyone who embraces this message. For everyone who wants peace. Of course, some people will have to fight with. There will be people that you can't really have like a roundtable discussion with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, for example. You can't really negotiate with these guys. And the Imam will take up arms. The Imam will have to resort to fending violence with violence. The Imam will demonstrate God's wrath upon those who deserve God's wrath, because they are depriving mankind of the chance for peace. So now you see, brothers and sisters, having talked a little bit about this beautiful vision for the future with the presence of the Imam, now you recognize how those people who deprive the world of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the children of Amir al-Mu'mineen, what a travesty of justice they committed. Now you recognize the words of Fatima al-Zahra, when she said, أَمَّا لَعَمْرِي لَقَدْ لُقِحَتْ فَنَظِرَةً رَيْثَمَا تُنْتِجْ. She says, now that you've committed this crime, just sit back and wait to start milking this cow of fresh blood, she said. She said, وَأَبْشِرُوا بِسَيْفٍ صَارِمٍ وَمُعْتَدٍ غَاشِمٍ. Now you're going to have to face the consequences of your actions. وَسَيَعْلَمُ التَّالُونَ غِبَّ مَا أَسَّسَهُ الْأَوَّلُونَ. Those who will come later will recognize the travesty of those who committed this crime by removing Ali from the equation. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, brothers and sisters, gave us a glimpse of the world of Imam al-Mahdi in the 4 tumultuous, turbulent, difficult, painful years of Ali ibn Abi Talib's reign. Because the greatest achievement of Imam al-Mahdi won't be space travel, although of course that's part of it. The greatest achievement is to fulfill the potential of mankind. The greatest achievement is that people will evolve from the stage of being illiterate, savage, ruthless primates and turn into angelic beings, celestial humans who will be worthy of walking with prophets and with the Imam of their time. They'll be worthy of setting their eyes on his luminous, beautiful face, having finally fulfilled their potential, having finally become human beings. Imagine, just imagine with me, if one value was applied in this world, one value became universal, the value of generosity. Imagine if everyone was generous, that the billionaires weren't stingy and miserly. Imagine if everyone cared about their brother and sister as though they cared about themselves. One value could change the world for the better, could turn it into some utopian paradise. Now imagine all of the divine values, all the virtues of prophets and messengers, all of God's attributes implemented on this earth. How's that going to change the world? What kind of a world will that create? We don't need miracles, by the way. Again, we're not talking about paradise. We're talking about this earth of ours. This pale blue dot in the vastness of the universe. If the value of generosity was applied, here's what you would get. You would get 1 billion like Abu Dhabi, 1 billion like Salman, 1 billion like Nuqdar, 1 billion like Umar. I'll wrap up with this if I may. I'm sorry I took so much of your time. One day, Amir al-Mu'mineen, it brings tears to my eye every time I remember this. He was outside, probably working on the farm, digging wells as he did, because when they took away the pen and paper from the hands of Amir al-Mu'mineen, this is the injustice that's led to the world we're in right now. The angle of deviation wasn't only like 2 or 3 degrees. The angle of deviation was 180 degrees. Instead of mankind moving in the direction of divine values, it went straight into the other direction. And that's why the world is the way it is today. Ali ibn Abi Talib was forced into digging holes, right? Digging wells, feeding the poor, quenching their thirst. To this day, you have bottles served in when you go to Hajj that say, Abiyah or Ali, Salallahu alayhi wa sallam. The wells of Ali. So the Imam is busy doing this. When this man approaches him, this Bedouin, random stranger, he says to him, Ya Ali, I'm hungry, give me some money. The Imam said, listen, there may be times when I have something to share with you, but I really have nothing right now. So the man immediately turned around and started saying, Wallah la yas'alannaka Allahu an mawqifi bayna yadik. I swear that on Judgment Day, God will ask you, why did you turn me away? Now, if this happened to any one of us, we'd be like, what an audacious beggar. I'm telling you I got nothing. This is what you say in response? God is going to ask you? As soon as Amir al-Mu'mineen heard that, the Imam said, bring him back. Call him. I want to talk to this man. So they brought him back. The Imam said to him, could you repeat that? What you just said to me? He said, Wallah, God will ask you on the day of judgment about me asking you, begging, but you didn't give me anything. The Imam said, Hadith says the Imam began crying. He sobbed out loud. Then he said to Qamar, go get me that shield. He gave him an address, specific features. So Qamar went and he came back. The Imam took the shield. Listen, he gave it to the beggar. Then he said to him, by the way, لا تخدعن عنه. Make sure that if you sell this, you don't sell it too cheap. Right? This is worth quite a lot. How much is it worth? The Imam said, فَكَمْ مِنْ كَرْبٍ كَشَفْتُ بِهِ عَنْ وَجْهِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. This is the shield I used to wear when I protected Rasulullah and Badr and Uhud and Hunayn and Khaybar. Qambar said to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, you could give this man 20 little coins, 20 dirhams, he says. You can give him 20 dirhams instead of giving him this shield that is priceless. Why don't you do that? The Imam said, listen, he said, God will ask me on the day of judgment. And I don't want to be asked by God by someone who came to me and I rejected. Brothers and sisters, if the value of generosity became universal, if the value of respecting parents became universal, if any of these values were applied in our lives and the lives of other people, this world would be turned into a paradise. We can see a miniature example of that in Arba'in. Those of you who have not been to Arba'in, you don't know what you're missing out on. The generosity you see there, the selfless sacrifice, the love, the harmony. And that's just one tiny example of how the world could turn out with the Imam returning. So, brothers and sisters, we have to pray. We have to plead to God. We have to beg for that day to come. Because you don't know what we're missing out on. Right? You have to be desperate enough. There's an etiquette in how to pray. Just like there's an etiquette in business correspondence, right? When you write a letter, when you address someone, the way you dress, right? There's an etiquette in the business world that you have to follow. When it comes to dua, there's an etiquette. When it comes to praying for the Imam, reaching out to him, there's an etiquette. And the most important of that, and my dear brother Mahdi John spoke about the ziyarah of Imam Zaman and the importance of the ziyarah, connecting with him, right? But the most important thing that you need to keep in mind is that you need to be desperate enough. You need to recognize your inherent poverty. You need to recognize that no matter how hard we try, we'll never be able to establish global peace. It's never going to happen. I can only fix myself. I can focus on myself and no one else. But then I have to beg God for his intervention. Right? They say no, the Shah was reigning king, was going to the shrine of Imam Rida alayhi salam. As he was entering, he saw this beggar. The beggar approached him. He said to him, "You're the king, you're the Shah, help me." So Nadir looked at him. He noticed that the beggar was blind. He said to him, "How long have you been out here?" He said, "I've been out here for about 15, 20 years. He said, "You've been outside the shrine of As-Sultan Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi ala fi was-salam for 20 years begging, but you've never begged him for your eyesight to be restored? You haven't been able to achieve that at least? This is the Imam we're talking about." He said, "No, I'm blind. How can my eyesight be restored? What are you talking about?" He said, "Listen, I'm going to go into the shrine of Imam Rida and I'm going to come back out in about 30 minutes. If you're still blind, I'm going to have your head chopped off." So Nadir Shah walked in. This man, for the first time in his life, was desperate. Because this is life or death now. This isn't just about some change so I can buy myself a sandwich. If my eyesight isn't restored in 30 minutes, I am dead. So he began to plead with the Imam with utter desperation for the first time. By the time Nadir Shah came back out, his eyesight was restored. He told him, "You see, you never really prayed, did you? You were never desperate enough. Now I made you desperate. You prayed, He answered. Let's pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do the ziyarah of the Imam and ask him with desperation, and he will answer." Thank you very much. Sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi. Allahumma salli ala
Send in loud salawat for our dear Sayyid. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brother Amin Hassan, can I bring you down here? A good friend of mine and a son of a good friend of mine. So we have some gifts, as we always do, for our special guests. Everyone's special here, but there's some people who are more special than others. If this is your first time attending, we always give the first people who show up here a gift, because we want to make sure they show up on time. And for all the Iranians and Arabs who guys got beat by Indians and Pakistanis here, people who go to Idara, or Idara's programs are usually start late, but the people of Idara, they're always early. So from the Hassan Khandan, if I can ask for one of you, either you or your wife, that come over here, and Zain Shah. Come on, don't be scared. It's a gift. It's a gift card. We're not going to scold you. These are our two first comers of the program. Yeah, applaud them. And maybe next program it could be you who comes first. Thank you so much, brother. All for coming. You too. So, our other portion is the raffles. So everybody take your red ticket stubs out. We have a wonderful Amin over here is going to be reaching into the pot. What's the down thumbs for? I can see you from here. So let's reach. Everyone has their tickets, right? We're going to read off the numbers. Okay? So Amin, give me one. There's 5 of these, by the way. And they're gift cards to my personal shop for hair restoration. No, it's actually Amazon gift cards, sorry. Alright, it's 1, 5, 7, 8, 3, 8, 0. Six little people. Alright. So, Amy, you want to give me another one? Mix it up real good. Make sure you get one so much. Inshallah, you can buy maybe a pack of 20 diapers for your newly born, almost newborn daughter. 1, 5, 7, 8. 3, 7, 8. Come on, it sounds like the Persian, poetry style. Yeah, that's all. Former student of mine. You owe me 20 bucks. I mean, John, one more, please. We got, begin. 1, 5, 7, 8, 4, 0, 3. Yay! She actually gave us a call and we give her a gift card. This is totally planned in advance. I'm going to give you another one. Thank you, Bushra. Alright, it better not be one of your family. I'm just saying. 1, 5, 7, 8, 2, 2, 2. Abu? Yes, brother. I don't know your name, I'm sorry. I need like half the rest of us over here. Thank you so much. Alright, last one. Give it a good spin. Give it a good, yeah. Good. Massage those tickets. Get the right number up. 1, 5, 7, 8, 3. Or as the Iranians say, 3. 5. 2. 3, 5, 2. 3, 5, 2. Oh, okay. Another brother. Brother, what's your name, sorry? Muhammad. Here you go, Brother Muhammad. Thank you. All right, and let's get a loud salawat for our dear brother Amin. All right, and now for the potentially most awaited part of the portion of this program. Surprisingly, not dinner. We arrived to our last part of our program. Sayyid Mahmoud Darsi has accepted to join us in the question and answer session. We're very short on time, so have them prepared and be very, very quick in asking your questions. And hopefully we get short answers so everybody gets a chance to ask whatever they need. Now, to enhance this program even more, and to enhance the question and answer session to the most ultimate state, we have the best of moderators, Haj Mahmoud Gharabi, who is also from the Gharabi Khandan, brother of the Mahdi Gharabi, uncle of the Muhammad Hussein. I am actually related to them. I'm their grandfather. Many of you know Mahmoud as one of our speakers. He used to speak for us a lot. Now he's too high class for us. A graduate of UVA and Harvard Divinity School. Mahmoud is currently getting a PhD in Islamic Studies at Columbia University. So please welcome him with a loud salawat.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We have a family trait that we just don't get along with microphones. So I figured what we could do in the brief time that we have, I've parsed a couple questions that have been posed to us either through email or the closed circuit live stream. But as well, I want to hear the questions that you all have so that we can benefit from the presence of Sayyid No. Originally, the plan was to have me on stage, but I didn't think I'm privileged enough to be on the same stage as our alim. So for starters, does anyone have a question to lead us off? Yes. If you don't mind, I'll bring the microphone to you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum assalam.
If you could please elaborate about hadith and when we find them, not worrying about what you said in your speech about the authenticity.
Thank you so much for that. So, the way I look at the authentication of hadith in this day and age is I feel it's like reinventing the wheel. Scholars have put in, endless hours and effort in trying to authenticate hadiths, filter them, making sure that narrations that don't conform to our beliefs or are contradictory to the Quran are excluded from our hadith traditions. They have already put in all the work. I feel like we can give the major sources of hadith, the major collections of hadith that we have today, we can give them the benefit of the doubt in the sense that we can consider them to be authentic unless and until proven otherwise. As a general rule of thumb, if you look at the works of Shaykh al-Saduq, for example, right, or you look at a book like, and in fact I'll mention a few books because I would recommend people to read them while we're on the subject. So you look at a book like Ihtijaj al-Tabarsi, for example, Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabarsi al-Imami, right? This is a book of polemics. This is a book of, basically it collects numerous traditions where the Imams would engage in debates and polemic arguments with other people of different backgrounds and different religious persuasions. It's a great book, and especially in this day and age, we really could use the wisdom that we can gain from that book. The debates Imam Sadiq had with atheists, with agnostics, with followers of the Sabian tradition, Zoroastrians, and so on, and Jews, Christians. So that's a book that we can easily and comfortably say is authentic, unless we have evidence to the contrary, right? Or if you look at a book like Ma'ani al-Akhbar, which is also a great work where the Imams interpret and shed light on the meaning of other narrations, either by the Holy Prophet or the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, right? Ma'ani al-Akhbar by Shaykh al-Saduq, incredible book. Ikmal al-Din by Shaykh al-Saduq as well. So these are primary sources of traditions and hadiths of the Ahlul Bayt that have been written centuries ago. We're talking 900 years ago, 1,000 years ago, during the lesser occultation of the Imam. This is a time when these scholars either had access to the Imam or they had access to the deputies, the ambassadors of the Imam. So their ability to authenticate those traditions was very, very strong. So that's why I feel like we shouldn't reinvent the wheel. We shouldn't try and authenticate every single tradition all over again, generation after generation. It makes no sense to do that. Which is why the grandfather of these esteemed friends of mine, Marhum Ayatollah Naini, used to say that looking at the authenticity of the narrations in Kutub al-Arba'ah, which are considered the four primary collections of hadith, Juhdul Ajiz. It is the futile effort of one who's unable to achieve his objective, meaning that you're wasting your time. These hadiths are for the most part authentic, and it's really a matter of diraya as opposed to trying to authenticate the sanad. And basically the important thing is for us to benefit from the messages of those hadith rather than just waste our time and beat around the bush as we look at every single person who narrated the hadith and whatnot. Because you can tell from many of these hadith that even without looking at this isnad, even without looking at the chain, right, the hadith itself speaks to you. The hadith itself is one that could only have possibly been originated from the words of the infallible Imams. I hope that answers that.
Thank you very much. Do we have another question? Yes.
Sorry, I had a question. You mentioned that there's life on other planets and other universes. I was just wondering when Imam Mahdi returns, will we be in touch with those people or communicate with them?
we have narrations that say that our Prophet and our Imams were also Imams of other intelligent beings in other planets, meaning that there are species out there, people if you like, or other life forms, carbon-based or otherwise, that exist in the vastness of the cosmos. And traditions tell us that our Imams were also their Imams, meaning they're already in touch with us. How that works is I've got a theory about it, which I won't get into right now. I think it's probably a little too elaborate, and I'd have to answer like 50 questions after I present it. But I do believe that the Imams easily, even using modern physics, they're able to be in touch with those life forms as they are in touch with us as well. Will we be able to see them? Why not? I mean, I honestly believe that interstellar travel will be the norm when the Imam comes, because again, if you take that figure that I mentioned, which has been narrated by the Hadiths, where the collective human knowledge is 2 units, add to that another 25 units. We're talking like 10 times the knowledge that we have today. 10 times. I mean, look at the advancements that we've made over the last 10 years. When we, for example, or let's say 20 years. We've had the internet for 20 years. And now we're able to communicate and make our lives miserable by using all kinds of social media networks and be in touch at all times, and just create dysfunctional families and dysfunctional societies. We can do that, and this was unfathomable. This was really inconceivable a mere 15 years ago or 20 years ago. So the fast pace of development that we see, given all the limited knowledge that we have today, multiply that by a factor of 10. And you can begin to paint a picture of just what a giant leap we'll be able to make. I guess when we make first contact, they'll know about us. I suspect that I'll be the captain of the first ship that ends up going there, so I'll convey your regards as well.
I personally love questions that go interstellar very fast, because it suggests to me that the questioner lives a very healthy and beautiful life. Because I'm like, I gotta worry about my taxes, what did Trump do now? You're in the stars, so I really appreciate those type of questions. I saw a hand here, but I'm gonna really quickly read a question that I think was very pertinent. I don't think I need to. Do I need the microphone? I do. So this was a question that was posed that I think is maybe speaks to some of us, and it's difficult to phrase. And I appreciate this person asked it. For their own sake, I'll ask it anonymously. I find it difficult to connect to Imam Mahdi sometimes. It is easy for me to be devoted to Imam Ali or Imam Hussein, but I struggle to have that same devotion to Imam Mahdi. What can I do to better my connection?
Thank you. So how can we develop our connection with the Imam of our time? It's a lot easier to connect with Amir al-Mu'mineen, with Imam al-Hassan and Imam al-Hussein, but not so much the Imam of the time. I think it's not, you don't need a PhD to understand that the disconnect exists in our realization that our Imam exists. He is in the flesh. He walks and talks and breathes. He sees us, but we don't see him. He recognizes us, but we don't recognize him. Just like Brother Mahdi Harabi mentioned, that the likeness of Imam Zaman is like Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. The Quran says that he recognized his brothers when they came, but they failed to recognize him. They didn't know who he was, which is interesting, given that number one, they were his brothers, for crying out loud. Number two, Imam Sadiq says that the distance that separated Yusuf from his father and his family was the distance traveled in 15 days, right? So there was they were literally next door to each other. They were so close and yet so far. And so why is it that they weren't able to recognize him? Let me share a beautiful hadith to illustrate this point. So the hadith says that when Yusuf's brothers came, He recognized them immediately, and so then he threw like a big banquet in their honor. I mean, these were people who were like really poor. They came in order to beg him to help them, to feed them, right? So he threw like a big banquet so they could eat. Then Yusuf realized that his younger brother Benjamin, who was the one who suggested to the brothers not to kill Yusuf, but instead to throw him in the well, thinking that at least this will give him a chance as opposed to being killed where that'll be the end of the story. So Benjamin really went out of his way, tried to save Yusuf, and he loved him. He genuinely loved him. Yusuf noticed that Benjamin was on the side, separate from everybody else, and not eating. So he went up to his brother. Again, Benjamin doesn't know who Yusuf is. Yusuf said to him, "What's wrong? Why don't you eat with your brothers?" He said, "Well, it's been about 40 years. I avoid eating anything with my brothers. I don't do things with them." He said, "But why?" He said, "Because they did something that's unforgivable, and I could never forgive them for it." He said, "What did they do?" He said, "Well, we had this little brother that my father loved and I loved, but they were jealous of him, they were envious. So they tried to kill him, and then eventually they threw him in the well. And I could never eat with them." So Yusuf said to him, "So you had a brother and you lost him? What did you do?" He said, "Well, it was tough, it was hard, it was painful." He said, "Did you end up getting married?" Yusuf said to Benjamin. He said, "Did you ever get married?" He said, "Yes, I did, even though I didn't want to, but I was always grieving, and my father said, you have to get married." So I got married and had kids. He said, "What did you name your kids?" He said, "God gave me 3 sons. I named one Qamis to remind myself of the shirt that was torn up to claim that Yusuf had been killed and eaten and devoured by the wolves. I named my second son Dam, after the blood that was used to stain that shirt, pretending that it was Yusuf's blood. And I named my third son Bi'r, the well, so that I could always remember the fact that they threw my little brother Yusuf in the well." Now, think about this for a moment, brothers and sisters. Benjamin, the son of Yaqub, the son of Ishaq, the son of Ibrahim, he still needs reminders. He still needs a way to connect him to his brother by naming his children after artifacts that related to Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. He was able to constantly be in his remembrance. Which is why I remember when the tragic catastrophe of the bombing of the shrine of Imam al-Hasan al-Askari in the house of Imam al-Zaman and Imam al-Hadi in Samarra took place in 2006. My uncle, the Marja in the holy city of Karbala, he said, "This year I instruct and I advise all of my followers that if they have children born this year, they should name all of them Hadi or Askari. Because this incident needs to be immortalized. This catastrophe, we can't just move on from this. This is big." My point is this: if we're unable to connect with the Imam, it's because we don't know enough about him, right? It's like not being able to connect with your neighbor that you seldom ever see, right? If you want to connect with him, get to know him. And getting to know him means doing the ziyarah on a daily basis. Because doing the ziyarah means that you're not talking about some abstract conceptual notion, who, to most of us, unfortunately, Imam al-Zaman is some abstract conceptual notion. To us, Imam al-Zaman is like 1 + 1 = 2. There has to be an Imam. All these things have created this image of, there's an Imam, that box is checked. But it's more than that. This is our father we're talking about, our real spiritual father. Al-Imam, Al-Abu al-Shafiq, Wal-Akhu al-Shaqiq, Wal-Ummu al-Rahim, as Imam al-Rida describes the nature of an Imam. So, he's more than just a formula, he's more than just an equation. By reading the ziyarah, you make that connection. By writing a ariba, you make that connection. I always say this, brothers and sisters, we all go through tough times, we all go through problems. Let's not imagine that we're left to our own abilities and our own skills. Let's always remember, if you were Bill Gates' son, or Jeff Bezos' son, or whatever, and you went through financial trouble, what would be the first thing you do? You'd pick up the phone and call your dad. You'd say, listen, I'm in trouble, I need your help. Why is it that when it comes to Imam al-Zaman, he's always the last resort? He's always the last thing, the last door we knock, it's the Imam. Traditions tell us, these are the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. The Nawab, the 4 deputies of the Imam, I'm sorry it took a little longer on this question because I think it's critical. The Nawab have left us with a template. And the template is exactly like a form, right? It's got spaces that need to be filled, your name, what you need, your wishes, your desires. And then once you sign that letter, you then send it to the Imam in the form of either throwing it in a well or dropping it in the ocean or sending it to be dropped in the bari of one of the infallible Imam's shrines. By writing to the Imam, he becomes a person, right? Assalamu alayka hina taqoom. Assalamu alayka hina taq'ud. Peace be upon you when you stand up. Peace be upon you when you sit down. Peace be upon you when you pray. Wa taqnut. By reminding you of these things, the fact that he's there, he's alive, he sees me, he comes to check out the tents of the pilgrims in Hajj and Arafat. The fact that the hadith says, Imam al-Sadiq says, he walks on your carpets, you just don't recognize. Build that relationship by writing to him, by addressing him, by doing the ziyarah. أشهد أنك تسمع كلامي وترى مقامي وترد سلامي. Don't we say this when we seek permission to enter the shrines of the Ahlul Bayt? I bear witness, meaning I have no doubt that you can see me, you can hear me, and you even say, oh, alaykum as-salam when I say salam. That's why when we mention the Imam's special name, we stand up. That special name, everybody stands up. Some say that Imam Rida would not only stand up, but he would stand on his 2 toes and place his hand on his head. Because the hadith says the Imam, when you say his name and say salam, he hears you. But when you mention that specific name, he looks at you.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Do you still have a question? Okay, sure.
Well, first off, assalamu alaikum. And could you, I was kind of intrigued by your theory of the interstellar.
What's with the air quotes? It's like you don't believe me, man. Go on.
With the extraterrestrial beings outside of our Earth. So I'd just like to hear your theory on what you think.
So as for your question, it was a great question. I think we probably elaborated sufficiently on that. I think it would be a waste for this universe to have nobody but people like me. That God somehow created this almost infinite cosmos where the nearest galaxy to us is like 5 billion light years away. The numbers are just baffling and mind-bending, and yet it's just us. So that's just, obviously it's just a hypothesis. And I think scientists and astronomers have always been motivated by the idea that we're not alone in this universe. And I think if you ask most scientists, they'll probably say the same thing, because the likelihood, again, speaking purely with empirical science, if you like, the likelihood of having another planet that allows for carbon-based life forms to flourish and to exist is very, very high, right? There are so many galaxies. We're talking about, what's the latest tally? And every time I read, and they've got a revised number of something like 200 trillion galaxies, right? Each one with an average of 200 billion stars, and each one with its own set of planets and comets and asteroids, and that's in addition to the infinite number of super massive black holes and other stellar objects. My point is, it's very likely that there are other life forms out there, intelligent life forms even. And I quoted traditions from the other days where they must clearly say that there are others out there. You're not alone in the universe. And my hope is that with the advent of the Imam and his return, we'll be able to make that connection and finally meet them, our cousins.
Thank you so much. All right, we have time for one more question. Just to be fair, I'm going to cut across the room because that was too long on this side. I actually have to bring this box with me. I'd like to request that this last question not be about space. If you have another question about space, probably want to leave it off to maybe bother say it during dinner.
Assalamu alaikum. I asked this question on behalf of some young adults that sometimes they have the question, why do we have to pray to our moms for our needs and not just pray to Allah?
Right. Well, why do we call our parents and ask them for pocket money when we could just ask Allah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the majestic, transcendent, supernatural, infinite creator of the universe. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refuses his majesty and his position, his lofty position, refuses to let God handle every little thing. Meaning that just like, it's not the best example, but it's kind of helps illustrate the point. Just like a king doesn't handle parking tickets, right? Because he's king, right? He delegates a lot of these tasks, and if anything, delegating to others highlights the authority of the individual. And so just like God can take our souls, but he's created an angel responsible exclusively, whose day job and night job is to just extract helpless souls from human bodies. Just like God has created water to quench our thirst instead of him just magically quench our thirst without the need to go through these mediums and these different creatures of his. In the same way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has stated unequivocally in the Quran, وَابْتَغُوا إِلَيْهِ الْوَسِيلَةِ. Seek a medium. I think my brother Mahdi John Harabi mentioned this, right? He has said that you need to seek a means, a vehicle, some medium, if you like, to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's just how he wants it. Just like God ordered the angels to prostrate before Adam, when he could have easily asked them to prostrate before him, right? As we do now. That would have resolved the problem, and Satan and us could have been neighbors in paradise right now. But instead, God tests us by creating these mediums and says, you want to get to me, come through this. You want to come to the door, you want to come to the house, you come through the door. You don't go through the window, you don't come down through the chimney, you come through the door. And the door is whatever God chooses it to be, right? And in this case, God chooses the prophet, about whom he even says in the Quran that if you want repentance, if you want forgiveness from me, go through the prophet. Which is amazing if you think about it, right? He said that if you go to the prophet and the prophet prays for you, just like the children of Yaqub. The children of Yaqub said to their father after the whole story unfolded and they recognized the errors of their ways, they said to their father to pray for them for forgiveness instead of them praying directly to God. So that's just the way God works. He says, you want things, I'll tell you where you need to go. I'll tell you, وَادْخُلُوا الْبَابَ وَقُولُوا حِطَّةً نَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ خَطَايَاكُمْ. Right? You have to go through the door. What is the door? نَحْنُ وَاللَّهِ بَابُ. The door is the Ahlul Bayt. And this is established in the Quran, and it's established in the Sunnah of the Prophet himself. Right? There is this hadith in Sahih Muslim where someone comes to the Prophet, he says to him, Ya Rasulullah, I'm poor or sick or something. So Rasulullah said to him, this is how you pray. You say, Oh Allah, I ask you, بِنَبِيِّكَ نَبِيَّ الرَّحْمَةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ, to grant me my wish. Ask in the name of Rasulullah. Right? I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much, Sayyid. Right before I turn over to Sayyid to provide us with an ending prayer, in your gift bags, there is a little box that you can assemble yourself that is just to be a repository for the alms for charity, that you already give. And the purpose of this is precisely 2 questions ago when Sayyidina was mentioning how we can actively remember Imam Mahdi so that he becomes more lively to us in our everyday life, how we can have our habits revolve around the Ahlul Bayt. This is dedicated for the health of the Imam. It's not going to any foundation. It's not going to any place. It's the same way that you would give charity. But the point of this is for us to remember Imam Mahdi and to pray for his health as we're doing something as integral as paying our zakat and all. So now, Sayyidina, I'll turn it over to you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا اللهم وهب لنا رأفته ورحمته وعونه ودعاءه وخيره ما ننال به سعة من رحمتك وفوزا عندك يا كريم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصل اللهم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد.
I'd like to thank the Sayyid one more time for giving us his time and blessing us with his presence and his beautiful words and answering all of our questions. Don't leave without getting food, is what I'm gonna make it really quick and short. There's food outside of the tables. There's one table that has food, another table has like sodas and drinks and stuff like that. And then there's also on the left side, you're going to see those bags that we've been talking about throughout the night. So take your goodie bag, take your soda or juice, and take your food. Don't leave without those. Otherwise, I'll have to give a lot of food tonight. Thank you all for coming. Inshallah, see you in the next programs. And like us on Facebook. You'll get emails from us regarding surveys and whatnot. We definitely want to hear back from you. We want to know how we can make this better for you. We want to make sure that you guys show up again and grace us with your presence. We've had a very enjoyable night with you guys. Thank you for sharing with us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
اللهم صل على محمد وآله
You want the halal, huh? Central Park.